Well, I've got 2 minutes after the hour here, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. This is our fifth and final AggieCon monthly webinar series that we've been organizing this fall with kind of the idea just to bring some different experts in different areas in front of different folks and give them a chance to interact and learn a little bit about some of the different areas that people are working on in the state. So feel free to type questions in the chat at any point. If we have some pauses, we'll certainly give a chance for you to ask questions directly to the speaker if you'd want as well. We do have two speakers today, so we'll kind of do a half hour with our first speaker and then transition over to our second speaker in that format there. So, but again, send questions in any time. And then we are recording today's session, so we'll post it on our website, same website that you logged in from. We also have recordings of our last 4 sessions there as well. So if you missed any of those past sessions and you want to go back and look at them or share them with somebody, just send them that link. You don't need a password or anything to view those recordings. So with that, let me introduce our first speaker, which is Zane Not Afraid with Intertribal Ag Council. Zane, I think, is based out of the Crow Reservation here in Montana, but he gets around Montana a lot, so you might see him some places that are a little far from the Crow Reservation as he does his work with Intertribal Ag. So what I asked Zane to present today was a little bit about some of the technical assistance options that are available, primarily through IAC, but he might know of a few others as well. So with that, Zane, I will turn it over to you.
You bet. Thanks, Joel. I appreciate you inviting me to here. Yeah, I'll do a quick overview of IEC, and then we have several programs I wanted to highlight. But let me share my screen and I'll get that presentation up here. Like Joel said, I'm here in Lodge Grass, Montana, on the Crow Reservation. I started working with IEC a few years ago, and I'm the interregional manager for our Rocky Mountain and our Great Plains regions. And we split up the regions kind of towards like the BIA formats, their region formats kind of follow their boundaries. And so Rocky Mountain, I'll get into the region format later on, but to kind of start off, just wanted to give our mission statement to kind of provide you with that. It's to provide a unified effort to promote change in Indian ag for the betterment of Indian people. And so that's we changed that over about a couple years ago, but that's kind of like our core mission statement. And then kind of for an overview of like where we started and kind of like where we kind of how we got started. We're a nonprofit organization nationally, and so but we actually kind of got started here in Montana actually, and up here on the high line, up there on the high line, the tribes up there, that's where it kind of originated out of, and hearing stories and from the original founders and kind of doing some research in the background of that, and hearing stories from even my grandparents of during that time. We got started in 1987, and if some of you might know this too, but there was a big decline in the 1980s for overall for the farm operations. A lot of foreclosure was happening. National natural disasters happening at that time. I hear stories of like the early 1980s snowstorm that happened, and they got foots and foots of snow, which was killing the herds off by numbers and driving operations into foreclosure. And then on top of that, I heard there was spiked interest rates at that time, which didn't help at all. So the native producers were like not getting the help and inclusion in the USDA programs. And so that's where we were kind of formed out of that unity from that. And we were getting the help that we needed to survive during those times. And so the tribes and producers here in Montana and then across the nation, as they got word out that they were forming this organization, there were 87 tribes in total that year in 1987. And they made membership, formed the organization, and then from there on tried to advocate for resources for native producers. And I like trying to say, like, instead of having like a scattered voice, they were able to unite that voice and kind of shout it to the USDA of their needs and their priorities. And so that's where IAC was born out of. And so we're almost 40 years in, and we're able to multiply programs on top of that. But that's where the basis of where we started. And so here are some numbers. I'll kind of quickly go over this slide. These are just some impact numbers on the ground. So we are nationally. So I have coworkers like in Florida, Oklahoma, even in Alaska, and so years have multiplied into servicing these producers, and these are just some numbers on our impacts on the ground. This is a picture taken of our organization a few years ago, but we've been able to expand. So we're able to, I think, add on at least about 20 more people to this picture. But these are the main core programs, our Technical Assistance Network, which I'll get into later on. That's the program I am in. Policy and Government Relations, the American Indian Foods, Regenerative Economies, Natural Resource and Regenerative Ag, and then our Youth and Professional Development. So I'll just hit on each of these. I wanted to spend some time on this policy and government relations, though. This has a lot of impact, and it kind of goes back to our core values of where we started. So we partnered with Indigenous Food and Ag Initiative and a couple other partners to form Native Farm Bill Coalition. And so basically, our lawyers within these organizations get together, and then they try to come up with, a written plan, a game plan of what needs to be included in the next farm bill. And I know we're kind of like in a sticky place right now with this farm bill being passed and the budget being passed, and so hopefully though we'll be able to influence some of those provisions. In the last farm bill in 2018, we were able to get 63 tribal specific provisions added into that, either updating regulations or statutes or adding more of it into the farm bill. And this is, I encourage a lot of producers to take advantage of this because there's a lot of red tape on these programs and for tribes and producers and overall for all of us. And so we want this to be aware to tribes and producers that this is where we can influence, some of these rules in their rule book. How can we change it? Because tribal land's real specific and it gets pretty messy when you go down that road. A lot of agencies are involved and BIA, and so there's a lot of red tape up there that we need to kind of break through. And so this is one of the ways is through our Native Farm Bill Coalition, and I'm sure proud of our lawyers and attorneys, advocating for us at DC on the Hill for this. Our next program I want to mention is our American Indian Foods program. This is actually one of the longer standing programs besides policy and government relations. It was, I believe, started in 1988 or 1990, but we got a cooperation agreement with Foreign Egg Service to, advocate for American Indian producers on the ground that want to get their products into the market space. And we've been able over the years to add a little more programs underneath this one. The export program is to try to get producers to international markets. And so they'll help pay for a producer that, producing a value added product to get their product to the international markets, whether it be seafood or bison or dried products from berries or whatnot. So they'll select a few producers that are really advanced in that they could sell to these markets, and they'll help them pay for their trade booths. I know they're pretty expensive, ranging thousands of dollars to rent these trade booths. So that's one of the ways we help with them. And another way to advocate for them too is through our Native Food Connection boxes. So we'll select some producers and put them into basically a box that holds about 20 some products, and we'll ship them for free for the producer to businesses and restaurants, and to try to get their product out there for them. And then the trademark here, as you can see, is our certified authentic made and produced by American Indians trademark, and they can put this on their product, on their actual product, and it's just basically like a seal of approval saying this is made and produced by an authentic American Indian. And so that kind of differentiate from non-Indians, because I know there is a market for this American Indian foods, and so we just try to make sure that Native Americans are being certified that way. But if you're interested or know anybody that's selling value-added products and that wants help with their marketing, just get a hold of us. I'll have my info at the end of this presentation, but it's real easy to get a hold of me. My first name is Zane, Z-A-N-E, at indianegg.org. But you can also look on our website too, indianeggfoods.org, for all the producers that we have that we help on our website. The next program I want to mention is our natural resources and regenerative agriculture. And so we have a team, about 4 or 5, I believe, that try to help on the ground with natural resource concerns, helping write conservation plans, manage their lands, and any tools that they can provide, to manage those lands. And they can help put on workshops or trainings too, to kind of talk about regenerative ag. It's a real like hot topic right now. So if the guys want, like, if there's a community that wants more information about that, we can help provide those services. That's where IAC can come in, and we try to be that middleman for supplying the resources and the information. So yeah, we have natural resource specialists actually here in Montana. We have some in Nevada and in Oklahoma too, but we have one here in Montana too, so that he can get around to the communities to help supply the information. Next one is our regenerative economies. And so to kind of support the natural resources and the region, we formed this regenerative economies to kind of, do the background check of what's it cost. Because it is, the producer has to put some money down to, for the conservation plans and to start up the projects itself. And NRCS, there's some opportunities in there to get reimbursed on some of those practices, whether it be infrastructure or just the rotational grazing part of it. And that's where we wanted to look into is what's the financial impacts of it and what will you gain after years of servicing your soil and growing that soil. How many more cattle can you operate on that piece of land because of the healthy soil. That's what we have a project going on right now. I think we're in year 2 of our third year project, to analyze, I think, about 10 producers right now that we're analyzing, and to gather data off the soil too. But I think we'll be publishing that project here in about a year or two once they close out on that. But the last project, or one of the other ones I want to talk about, is our youth and professional development, and we're trying to get more engaged into Native youth, because, as you all know, it's a big gap right now in the age of ag right now, and we're trying to advocate for that. One of the ways we can do that is Food for Families program. So if you are part of a 4-H program that wants help, and we can provide stipends to help for that 4-H cell, or help with the processing end of it too. We can give a little bit of stipend for that. So if you have, of a youth that wants to be part of that program. And then we also have a couple of scholarships, our Bob Miller Memorial Scholarship, and then our IEC annual conference essay contest. That's an essay contest that will select 4 or 5 youths to come to our national conference in Las Vegas to talk about their essay, and to just get exposure to the native agriculture world across the nations. So that's being held in it's usually the first week of December in Las Vegas. Last year we had it at Palm Resort. But yeah, they'll be able to access that conference for free. Once, if they get selected, they'll be on a stipend and travel for free on us. And then also our internship program. This is a pretty unique program. We try to help the youth in their field for their if they have a project in mind. They can obviously work with the TAs with us, but if they want to work on a project in their community that they're real passionate about, then they can do that. We'll help them with a stipend in their travel to help them get through that project. And then they would, in turn, supply us with either information and presentation on that project and what their results were. And then our youth soil health days. So that's where natural resources comes in. They can help supply a soil health day for a youth, for a community. So, if there's a school or a college or anybody that wants to do a youth soil health day, that's where we can kind of come in and help supply that workshop. And then our youth regional summits. We're having quite a few youth regional summits. So I'll show later on the format of our regions, but for Rocky Mountain region, we're going to have a youth summit this year, and it's going to be June 13th and the 14th. So if you know a native youth that's real interested in ag, and it's high school to college age, I think it's 13 to 26 age. And yeah, if they're interested, just let us know and we can get them the information. But we're going to cover, topics from native food sovereignty to those regenerative topics with ranching, to some opportunities with USDA, and then we're trying to get some like hands-on demonstrations with native food there too, to kind of go through what it looked like to do preserving native foods like drying meat and stuff like that. And so it'll be a two-day event there in Billings, Montana on June 13th and the 14th. But yeah, that's our youth and professional development program. And then our IAC TA network program is with the program I am in. This got started about 2010, 11. And I don't know if you guys ever heard about the Keep Seagull claim settlement that happened during that time. But the funds that came out of that settlement was to advocate for native programs and native producers, and some of it was dedicated to set up organizations like NAF, Native American Agriculture Fund. They were kind of out of that claim, that settlement, and then we were offered some money to support this program, the Techno Assistance Network. And so we are the like on the ground support for USDA programs. And we try to identify resources for producers, support food sovereignty initiatives, basically try to just get the information to the tribes and producers. And we're stretched pretty thin though, because there is quite a few agencies out there. Just for Montana, the main ones would be, FSA, NRCS, and RMA. And then on top of that, you would have, AMS and FNS, and it just goes on and on, rural development. And so we try to research if there's a question from a tribal producer, or we can't be experts in each specific field, but if we're kind of like a switchboard. So we just try to connect people with people, try to do the best research we can for that producer or tribe. And then these are the format for our regions right now. So Rocky Mountain is Montana and Wyoming, and that's where our region is. We'll be looking for actually a technical assistant specialist right now for hire. So if you know anyone that has that background of USDA or just the field in general on native land, you can let me know too, and we're hiring for that position right now. But we have a TA in Fort Belknap, Marlene Work. She's a little busy today. She's out of training, but we have a TA up there. And then yeah, so if you guys know of a person that might be interested in that or might have the qualifications for that, they don't have to have a degree or anything like that. It's more of like knowing some of the programs, maybe be a producer, have that connection to tribal reservation land. That's what we're kind of looking for. But like I said, I have coworkers in Alaska and Oklahoma and New Mexico and the Northwest into Washington. That's what gets pretty unique. So we hear a lot of resources from my other coworkers. If something pops up, on the East Coast that we could use over here, they let us know about it, and vice versa too. We try to shoot emails over to our coworkers, and then we try to connect people even between our coworkers. If there's a person that wants to be interested in buffalo, I know they just now get in Buffalo in Alaska. I heard about that. Like that, my coworkers were talking about that, trying to help with that. So yeah, we get kind of unique, and that's where our space is. We kind of help out more about trying to pass information from different tribes across the United States to other tribes. But that's basically what the TA network is. And so yeah, that's where my field is, and I'm the interregional manager for our Rocky Mountain and our Great Plains region. So our Great Plains right there is in the gray. It's North Dakota, South Dakota, and Nebraska. And so we broke up our interregions just to help out the TAs on the ground. So we have 4 interregions right now: the central, the east, and the west, and the northern. But that's our TA network. And one thing I wanted to mention, this is our membership. I'll mention this briefly though. This is for tribes that want to be a member into our membership. We have a caucus meeting each annual conference. And this caucus meeting, they can bring up the concerns or priorities that they want us to focus on for the next coming year. And so we'll have at least about 15 or 20 issues that we should be looking at, and we can select a few to really focus on, 4 or 5 that we can really focus on for the year. And it could range, from like food distribution to BIA. It's just across the board. But the membership, they'll, that's what they'll be a part of each annual conference in Vegas. They'll come and they'll let us know what to work on for the next coming year. Um, and then, yep, so this is our regional conference, our Rocky Mountain Youth Regional Summit. It'd be held in Billings, June 13th and the 14th, at the Bighorn Resort. So yeah, if you know any youth interested in that or might be interested, just let me know. Um, and here's my contact info, Zane at indianegg.org. And my number is 665-5394. And before I close out, though, I wanted just to mention a program that we're just now getting, organized and getting going is a cooperative agreement with NRCS, and they're doing a lot of climate smart commodities projects, and it's basically like like regenerative ag. They want to get a lot of money on the ground for that right now, and so there's a ton of these projects on the ground. But one of them we're partnered with is Farm Journal Foundation, and we'll basically be doing the same thing with like NRCS is doing on the ground, equip, CSP, trying to help producers get those rotational grazing operations on the ground, and we can help with costs for infrastructure, for water wells and fencing to help supply that infrastructure for that rotational grazing. And we're targeting native producers in Montana, Florida, and Oklahoma right now, and the project will probably be kicked off here in about June, May. We're still trying to get the contract, organized and approved. And so, there's some things we have to work around, but I just wanted to let you guys know this will probably be coming down the line this year, and it'll be a 3-year project. And also too, on top of that, they'll be, put into a market for the carbon market. So they'll be looking at the soil data, and then they can verify it, and then they can be put into a carbon credit market, so they can basically get their credits bought from big pharma, or big companies, General Mills and all those ones. They'll be put in a market so that they can basically be being paid to do these practices on the ground. And that's one of the cool things about these climate smart projects. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that real quick before I jumped off here. But if there's any questions, yeah, don't be afraid to reach out to me later on. I'm free most of the time, at zane@indianegg.org. Thank you guys.
Thanks, Zane. That was great. Two questions came in along the way. One was quite a while back, at the start of your presentation, but can you think of any Montana examples that were able to utilize some of your food support assistance programs?
Yeah, we have one producer right now. I think he's a couple years in, or actually, he's out of Polson, and he's a beef producer. And he's one of the very few that actually slaughters his beef and then provides it and packages it and does A to Z, all the way. And those are really unique. And yeah, he's out of Polson, but he can be found on our website too. Yeah, if you have any questions about trying to source his beef, I can get you in contact for sure with him. One other person I just met actually last week in Crow. His name's I don't want to mention names, but he's producing dry like berries and fruit into strips. So he's calling them fruit strips, I believe. And so I'm just trying to get in contact with him, actually try to get him in the program. But yeah, there's some out there. I know we're like on the region where it's not too many, far between, but I know there's some out there.
All right, thank you very much. The other question that came in was, you mentioned Marlene was a technical assistance provider. When do they contact you versus contacting Marlene?
Yeah, we're in the same capacity. We're both TAs, but they just wanted managers to kind of help the TAs on the and get the communication better between the higher agencies, and then better communication. Even with us, we're running on remote right now, and it's hard to contact our our bosses all the time, and so that's where kind of like the liaison between our organization too. So if you want to reach out to Marlene, she does the same thing as I do. She does all the USDA programs too.
And she's up at Fort Belknap, is that correct? Just
Yep,
location? Yep.
yep. She's out of Fort Belknap.
Great. Well, let me open it up to anybody on the webinar here. If you want to ask a question, now's your chance. So we did have a question come in here. How strict is the age limit for the youth summit?
It. I mean, as long as they're in high school, or if they're even like Well, I think we'll consider like an eighth grader if they're pretty advanced. You know, if they're pretty advanced and if they're interested in ag that much, I think we'll consider an eighth grader. But if as long as they're in high school, we'll consider them for sure.
Hi, Zane. This is Kristen Ruppel. That was a question that I had asked. I was actually thinking about the other end of the
Oh,
of the
sorry.
age spectrum. I have a student who I recently hired on a project that's doing some work with Blackfeet, similar kinds of issues. And she's a non-traditional student, native, kind of raising her kids, on her own and just getting back into an undergrad degree right now in land resources and environmental sciences. And she's, I don't know how old she is. I haven't asked, but I'm pretty sure she's not 26 or younger. So I'm just wondering, just as I'm looking for training opportunities for her to engage in that I'd be able to support her in doing, would somebody like that be, would you be able to waive the upper limit there?
Yeah, I mean, if she's going for her undergrad and it's something that's ag related like that, I mean, we can talk to her and we can probably work something out too. I mean, we're just trying to capture these people because we'll have USD agencies there for like a career path too. So
Right.
yeah, definitely contact me and we can talk it through though.
Okay, that sounds great. That's all I needed to know. Thank you.
You bet.
Thanks for that question. Are there any other questions from our audience today? Well, Zane, any final comments you'd like to share with our group?
No, that's about it. I just thank you, Joe, for letting me be a part of it today.
Yeah, well, thanks for joining and sharing a little bit about some of the expertise IAC has that's available to folks in Montana and in some other places as well. So,
You bet.
all right, well, we'll shift gears now to our second speaker, Dr. Eric Belasco, who's a professor here in the department and also department head of the Department of Agricultural Economics and Economics here at MSU. So, with that, Eric, if you want to go ahead, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Joel. And Zane, thank you for that presentation. I guess, so I was given the livestock update, and last week, Caitlin from LMIC gave a really nice update kind of on the cattle market. And so what I hope to do is to build on kind of what she has discussed in the last program that Joel hosted. So, and I can't apparently figure out how to do slides, so Joel is controlling the slides for me. If you can go to the next slide, please. So just to kind of get started with some things, looking at some of the cattle prices that are out there and some of the grain prices that we have. And, for economics, we look at this to see what kind of signals the market is sending. Are those signals for more product in the short run? Are they for more product in the long run? So what I have here is just a few different commodities that we kind of pay attention to, different commodities that are actively traded. The MGEX hard red spring wheat, which is what a lot of spring wheat producers will be using to hedge, usually in December on that December contract. And so looking at the price about 683, as we get into the discussion later, one thing that we'll see is that these prices are quite a bit lower than what they've been in the recent years, but still, pretty strong prices, still above kind of the historical averages, but not quite as high as they once were. Same for winter wheat, it's a bit lower than it kind of has been, selling that December contract at 611 right now. For feeder cattle, 253, those prices have stuck up at a pretty high level for quite some time. And Caitlin talked a lot about, inventory numbers, some of the input costs have gone up, different things that have prompted those prices to kind of remain where they've been. This is one of the longer, upside cattle markets that we've seen in a while. A lot of times when we see prices spike, they come down very quickly, just because as those market signals hit the market, you see more supply, and then the prices fall accordingly. But that has not been the case in the feeder cattle market. In fact, if we look out to the November contracts, clearly some good prices, 253. In real terms, these are a little below what they were in 2014, but if you remember, those prices did not stick around for very long. So the fact that they were in really our second, maybe third year of strong prices is notable. And then I put the live cattle price up there as well, just to see kind of what that market is looking at, about 180 a pound going forward. Next slide, please. And I think back one, maybe. Oh, okay. Nope, sorry. Yeah. Okay, so for wheat prices, like I said, we came off some highs in 2021, 2022, and it really wasn't just wheat, it was all the grains experienced this same bump in prices. And then they're really in this period of kind of leveling off. In these competitive markets, what we tend to see is these, in a market that really doesn't experience any disruption, we see these prices kind of heading toward the average break-even price. And so for wheat, that seems like it's around $6 a bushel. That's kind of where the forecast is headed, as we head out. Although if you look back historically, you'll see that prices were never really that smooth, and that's just because things happen. Geopolitical markets, shut down imports from different countries. Some countries will have a drought. You'll experience high demand in other countries. You'll see population growth drive demand. Different things do happen. So, but really just from some of the conflicts, it's not that those conflicts have gone away in Russia and Ukraine. It's just they're sort of more priced in, and a lot of the grain is actually still getting out from that region. Next slide, please. In the cattle market, it's a fairly similar story, although for very different reasons. This is not kind of an international geopolitical story at all. This is really a lot of, these livestock, prices are a fact of, supplies, as Caitlin talked about in the last presentation. And so, we saw a big increase, and you'll notice that it's been kind of this hump-shaped, recovery, and we're still kind of at the top of the mountain. But as we look forward, you can see this kind of slow movement down to kind of more normal prices that we would see in the market. So these are the average, livestock prices, received. This is a projection going out to 2033. And I guess one thing I'll note there is, just like with the grain markets, these projections are really assuming that nothing else happens. When we're talking about grains, we're talking about the international markets. When we're talking about cattle prices, it's really the domestic supply is the big story. Demand can certainly change a bit, but consumers can be, pretty fickle. If prices go up, they'll substitute to something else. And so, when we experience drought in some of these production areas, we're going to see prices go up. And so, we have drought kind of persisting across the US in different areas. And we also really have not seen, the inventory increases yet. And until we start to see those increases in inventories, we're really not going to see prices, start to drop. So as you start to see those price decreases, expect to see, the response in prices as they go. So next slide, please. And this was something that Caitlin talked a bit about in her presentation, was just this idea of a cattle cycle. And it's one of the reasons that we have these responses. You'll notice that the cattle market can be very volatile. Different than the wheat market, where it's like, well, you have a planting and a harvest season that are very well defined. And there might be some inventory stored, but by and large, what happens in one year doesn't really impact what happens in the next year. But because with beef, we're really talking about, a 2-year cycle. These things do have an impact. And so, when you see kind of big cattle reductions, as we've seen in the last couple of years, it takes a while to kind of get back to rebuilding. The other thing that you'll see is really since the mid 70s, there's been, a downward trend as we've seen inventories slowly falling over time. And that's even true in Montana, where we see these kind of things happening. Next slide, please. Some of the things to consider. So when we're looking at, if you're, kind of at the bottom, at the trough of this, cattle cycle, hopefully, we are, maybe we aren't. But really, in order to get that inventory back up, you really got to think of some of these trade-offs in terms, to rebuild a herd size. And, a lot of what it comes down to is, you're really giving up revenue today to increase your future revenue. In our kind of econ classes, a lot of times we talk about this as like the cutting down the tree example. Do I cut down the tree today? Do I let the tree continue to grow and cut it down? Maybe I'll have more, lumber in the future. And so it's the same thing with cattle, where it's like, well, do we sell them today, or do we kind of hold some back, let them grow, maybe increase the stock, have some more calves next year, and kind of build up future revenues. Well, those are all going to depend on kind of how we see prices today versus the future prices. And those rebuilding decisions can take, up to a couple of years. And so that can be somewhat time consuming, especially when you're looking at, pretty decent prices. There are also some kind of financial considerations, cash flow, which, one thing that we'll talk about in a minute when we talk about utilizing agricultural insurance is a good way to kind of keep strong cash flow so that when you do have an opportunity to rebuild, you're kind of ready for that. Okay, next slide, please. The big story, has been inputs, and not just the price, but also the availability. So hay, we saw 2 years of extremely high hay prices. Hay is completely driven by local supplies. So when you see a drought in an area, you can expect, as the supply shifts down, you're going to expect those prices to go up. So that's certainly what we've seen. Prices are kind of moving back toward kind of more of this longer run average. This is accounting for inflation. So using 2022 dollars, the average, kind of prior to 2022 was, just under $150 a ton. And we're still at about 184. But one thing that you'll see is that we're not quite to 150, but we're pretty darn close to it. Next slide, please. And this just kind of marks off kind of how we got there. The green line there, 2021, as Montana entered into the drought, you'll see the prices increase. They remained up there for all of 2022. And then 2023, really as, better rainfall, and not across Montana, but certainly in some areas of Montana, started to see better conditions. And so as that production went up, prices going back down again. And so you'll see we're about at like the 160 level right now, which is, a little higher than kind of our long run average, but we'll kind of see where that takes us. Next slide, please. So a couple of things I'm going to talk about, and one of the stories I think over the last couple of years is really participation in these programs in Montana, and these are also national trends too. We just see more participation in both of these programs. Pasture rangeland forage, a crop insurance product to protect against lower than normal levels of rainfall. And so if you're experiencing low levels of rainfall, that product will trigger a payment, and then you can use that to offset your losses. Usually those low rainfall numbers correlate with less production, higher feed costs. And so you can use those payments to offset some of that. The other thing that's really more recent is the livestock risk protection. It's a program that's been around for a while, but it's, I guess, more recently being utilized in Montana. So the basic idea there is you establish a price floor. It's like, you know, in our classes, we teach about put options, and that's essentially what it is. So, you know, you establish a price floor, and then if prices fall below that, you receive a payment. Next slide, please. So PRF, one of the measurements that we see for how well these insurance products, you know, provide funds in times of, you know, adverse weather conditions is through what we call the loss ratio. And basically there you take the amount of money that's paid out to farmers divided by the amount of money they pay in premiums. And so the higher the loss ratio, the more money farmers are getting back relative to what they've put in. So the last couple of years, last 4 years, we've seen farmer paid loss ratios above 2, which means they've been putting in, on average, for every dollar they pay in premium, they've been getting $2 in indemnities. And that usually goes along with years where, you know, you have drought conditions, you have, conditions where a lot of payments are being triggered. So, you know, just like, you know, other things, we've seen kind of this saddling for quite some time, you know, last 4 years. And the other thing I'll point out is that, you know, anything above 1 there is just, you know, saying that, well, those are the times. If it were exactly equal to 1, it means that farmers are getting back in payments exactly what they're paying in premiums. And there are definitely years where it's lower than, but you'll see when it's above it, it gets way above it. So take like 2017, for example, there were a couple years below 1, but then it just exploded to like, you know, 3.5. So when that drought hits, you know, it's a good program to have. Okay, next slide, please. And then even one of the tricks with PRF is you have to select kind of these 2-month intervals to define where rainfall is the most important for your operation. And even there, we can see that there's a bit of variation in payments for, you know, different intervals. Intervals that, you know, a lot of people would select maybe in like late spring, early summer. So like May, June kind of periods. Those loss ratios are pretty good. The only ones that are going to be below 1 right now are in the fall, September, October, November. And so, you know, those ones have been a bit lower, but the rest of them have been pretty high. You know, very high kind of into the winter months. So January, February, November, December, those loss ratios are pretty high. And again, high loss ratio just means there's a lot of payments going out relative to what farmers are putting in. Next slide. And so one of the things that's happened with this product and with other products as well is that you'll see it, you know, started in 2010 and kind of went along with some pretty low participation, kind of ebbed and flowed for a while. But then starting in 2020, which is where, remember, we started to see those high loss ratios, which means that's when droughts were starting to hit Montana. We start to see this increase in participation. And every year since then, it's increased, just almost in this stepwise production. And so the variable that I have here is liability. That's the amount of value that people are insuring. So you can see last year it was almost $150 million in total liability. And, you know, just in like 2019, it was about 25 million. So it's gone up more than 10 times that amount over that time. So, you know, ranchers are clearly seeing value in this program, you know, during drought periods. Next slide, please. So that's with PRF. The other program is LFP. So remember, this is the ability to set a floor, a price floor. So, you know, you look at today's prices and you're like, okay, 250, that looks great. I'd love to lock that in. And that's kind of really what like LRP or put option is intended to do. So it establishes this bottom level where it's like, you know, let's say something wacky happens to the cattle market and a month from now prices are 150. You have that floor, meaning that you're going to kind of lock in that higher price. And, you know, the other benefit I would say about put options is that let's say prices are 250 today, but then they move to 350 in a month. You aren't missing out on that. So you're still taking that upside opportunity. This one has grown by so much in the last couple of years. You can see, from 21 and 22, in those years we were looking at it saying like these numbers are unheard of. And then, to have a program go from 25 million to over 200 million in one single year is pretty remarkable. And it's not quite as high in 2024, but obviously people will still be enrolling in 2024. So at least as high in 2024. Okay, can you go to the next slide? And then one more. Okay, so we have these insurance programs, and what do they do? And I think in the cattle business, our main risk factors are going to be price risk and then, production risk. Are we going to have kind of the inputs available to feed over the winter? And then what's that price going to look like at the end? And these are the two, programs that provide insurance against things moving against you. One thing that it can do is it can allow for cash flow in some of those down years. So LRP is a great example where if the prices fall, then payments are going to be triggered. That money then goes into your cash flow, and that money is then available even in a down year. Same with PRF. You experience a drought, your costs have gone up, but you have these payments that could help kind of steady your cash flow. So the idea is maybe that helps to smooth out inventory fluctuations. So if you're getting that extra cash flow, helps you maybe to keep some animals, even though you have to pay more for that feed, helps you to maybe steady out some of those. The other thing could do is provide some additional revenue to help rebuilding when conditions do improve. So when the rain comes, when the market's right, and you're ready to go, you have cash on hand to, maybe buy some calves and really kind of jumpstart your rebuilding. And the last comment there, it does not eliminate the need for decent weather. That's really been one of the things that's held everything back is, there's been a lot of cash on hand in ranches this year with, good cattle prices. And especially if, the typical response has been, well, let's sell off a few more animals. We can't have the same carrying capacities we normally have. So as you're selling those animals off, that's going to go into revenue. But then what do you do with that? How do you reinvest that? And, weather is really required for some of that. Next slide. And so just some research that we're working on here at MSU to try to answer some of these questions. And, one thing we're looking at is how long does it take to rebuild after drought? And, it seems like that relationship has really changed over time. As we looked at those cattle cycles, they seem to be getting longer and longer. In fact, there's an argument that maybe cattle cycles don't even exist anymore. The other question, when you see these reductions in inventories, do operations ever get back to where they were before they sold off? Because, it does take some time, it takes some effort. And so that's some of the things that we're looking at. The second thing, looking at how these federal programs impact the cattle inventory response. We have a number of years where these programs have been in place, and just see what kind of impact does that have on the cattle cycle. And then there's one paper I'm interested in where we're looking at growth in PRF and just what kind of factors are causing gains in that, across the country. So, as they get more expensive, what kind of impact does that have on participation? What about after you experience a drought? Do we see more participation or less? It seems like in Montana, we've seen more participation after the drought, which isn't really, how we want to manage things, but it's certainly in human nature to see, that opportunity. Next slide. And then, a couple things that we're working on right now out of the Northern Plains Climate Hub. We're looking at how do we make decision that's useful and kind of actionable to ranchers in making some of these inventory decisions. So what kind of information would you like to see? And we're trying to do some groups, get some groups, focus groups together this summer to try to get at what kind of information should we be putting out there to really, put this information in front of ranchers so they can use it and make better decisions, whether it's flexible stocking rates, whether it's, you're sitting in the spring and you think there could be a drought, what are you going to be doing? Are you carrying the same rates over the summer? What are you going to do? So some of that information, price information, crop insurance information, we are interested in a lot of that input to see how we can better communicate some of those efforts in the future. And then I think last slide there. So thank you for your time. As Joel mentioned, I'm the department head also. So if you have comments, feedback on stuff I'm working on, stuff you think our department should be working on, stuff you think how we can, provide better value to farmers and ranchers across Montana, please get in touch with me. Thanks, Joel.
Thanks, Eric. Before I open up to questions from everyone, we had 2 questions come in along the way. The first is, what factors are driving the long-term inventory decline in cattle numbers in Montana?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a research question too. I think for a long time we thought that there are some systematic and kind of demographic factors that could be driving some of that. So you've seen a lot more shifts toward, away from maybe diversified operations, which could, have some reductions there. The average operator age on ranches is, not getting younger. Every year we see it ticks up a few years. And, if you think about rebuilding, especially as you're getting later in life, there's kind of less of an interest there. But it's also just, you look at the prices. I think at least right now, it's hard to kind of forego those prices that we're looking at and say, well, let's see what the market looks like in a couple of years, because some of those look really attractive. The other thing I think that we hypothesized about, and I haven't seen this in research at all, was just that there was a movement towards more intensive crop production and away from some of that diversified production, mainly because you could get crop insurance on the crop side, whereas ranching was still a pretty risky business. But I do think, with some of these insurance products coming on board, I mean, it's still a risky business, don't get me wrong, but maybe it's a less risky business in the future. So maybe that could help to stabilize some of those things.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. I think I've also heard over time cattle sizes are getting bigger too. So
Yeah.
having a 1980 cow versus a 2020 cow, we've grown a little there too.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Like we're, the consumer market is pounds of beef, not heads of cattle. So yep, you're absolutely right.
So the other question before I open it up to the audience here, question, where do I sign up for, how do I get an insurance contract under either of those programs you discussed?
Yeah, so there's an agent lookup on the RMA website, which I can share with you if that'd be helpful. You find an agent. So all those programs you would purchase through a crop insurance agent, which is, they're all going to sell the same RMA insurance products.
All right. Well, thanks, Eric. That takes care of the questions that came in already. Would anyone in the audience like to either send in a question, or if you'd like to ask one, now's your chance. All right. Well, Eric, are there any final comments you wanted to share with the group?
No, just thanks, Joel. I want to just say I appreciate your work on organizing these webinars and bringing, I really enjoyed listening to Zane and hearing what he had to say, just bringing people together and recording these. I think it's a really great output for Montana agriculture. So thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Eric, and thank you, Zane, for taking the time to prepare and present today to our audience. Again, we did record these sessions, so if you watched this and want to share it with someone, check the same website that you logged in from. And that does conclude our kind of winter series here, which I hope means that winter is over. At least I'm ready for no more snow, but we'll see how that goes. And then watch our schedule and we'll see if we may run the series again next winter as well. So thanks everybody and have a great day.